One step, attach robotic ignition system. Thank you for using help desk technology.
Clank, no! Hi everyone, sorry for being pretty silent, just wanted the opening cutscene to play out. So, what happened was, I actually, I gotta fix everything again. Much better, okay. So what happened was, I actually beat the game, and then, long story short, I just pretty much lost all of my content a while ago, because I'd actually played this game and recorded it a while ago, and just never really got around to fully editing it, and well, let's just say power surges aren't good, and I need better backups, put it that way. But I'm replaying this game much more currently, and this is basically after me beating it. I'm just gonna be basically just doing a second playthrough, which will be much faster, I think. Still get the same gist of everything for the most part. And less of me failing and dying, because, not gonna lie, I definitely died quite a bit. Which also sucks too, because I was in the middle of playing the third Ratchet Clank game, and I lost pretty much all of that content, so that I'm gonna have to do from scratch, which is gonna be a lot more difficult. Because I didn't actually finish beating that game, so there is no, like, oh, I get to do a second playthrough with all my upgraded guns. I gotta do that one from scratch and fail pretty miserably, but thankfully that game's a lot easier than this game. Now, before we get into the actual history stuff, I do want to point out a couple of things about this particular game and why I love Ratchet and Clank, and I think should be important context for why I'm playing a lot of these older games now. It's first and foremost, games aren't as fun as they were back then before. I think for a lot of reasons. I think it's just because there's a level of... See, there's this. It's super weird. You know what? I'm gonna just check. I should have just checked first. Is there a... There's no, like... So there just is no strafing. Cool. Okay. Just wanted to double check, make sure I wasn't doing this game more difficultly, making this game far harder on myself than was actually needed. Now, games aren't as fun as they were back then. And I've been trying to figure out why. I don't know if it's because there's just a level of safety and lifelessness in video games that permeates just the industry nowadays, where pretty much everything's a sequel, not a lot of original ideas. I tend to attribute a lot of it to diversity, inclusivity, equity, all that stuff too. I think that's a big reason and part of it. But just really, they're just not as fun as they were anymore. And I think it's priority over of graphics, and I think epicness and grandiose aesthetic natures versus content, core values of what make good storytelling video games in general. And I think just, you know, they chose a look versus content, I think, more often than not. You know, it's not like these Ratchet and Clank games are like braved of just incredible content, but they're fully expansive worlds that are very unique, that they're able to build just this whole universe out of, which has lasted even to today. You know, I do intend to play most, if not all, of the Ratchet and Clank games, because I just love what they are able to do and the content that they were able to produce. You know, if I have the time, because I do want to do like other games too. Like I want to do like Sly Cooper and a bunch of the other games. I thought about doing Jack and Daxter, and I have recorded some gameplay of it, and it's tough because I think this goes a little bit with Sly Cooper too. Is the first game's super fun, but it's a real controlled, complicated mess, and then Jack and Daxter is a little bit weird personally with me, because I think the games are fun and I do enjoy the stories that they tell, particularly the third one. But I also think it's fair to say that I'm just not quite the biggest fan. Like, it's out of the big three of that PlayStation era, and of like Jack, Daxter, Sly, and Ratchet, Jack is a clear third. I'm just gonna level with you on that. Although I can see how it could be a lot of people's favorites. And then that's gonna come to the issue with Sly Cooper, at least with me, because the first game's pretty hard, and the controls are very, very basic for being the first game. And although I think I might end up playing it just because the first game's, at least just the main story stuff, pretty short. I could probably beat that in like 5 or 6 hours, reasonably so. And then on top of that, you know, the sequels are worth it in every sense of the word. The second one's probably my favorite. The third one is a slightly worse version of the second one. And then the fourth one, the Thieves in Time, is actually surprisingly really, really good. And I think really interesting, and maybe want to hope that they could actually make a sequel. We'll see. You know, I've been hearing a bunch of weird things lately about Sly Cooper, and I think they're going to attempt to revitalize the franchise. Especially since they tried to make a movie out of it at one point, but then just didn't, so we'll see.
So you see, it would be most beneficial if your citizens were not in the city when my workers begin removing it.
Preposterous! I will not stand for this.
Unfortunately, you have no choice in that.
Let's just see what Captain Quark has to say about that, my good man.
I swear, just this humor, man, I'm telling you. You know, I think it's just so fun, you know? Even if the messages tend to be biased or whatnot with a lot of these, you know, early 2000s games, which a lot of them is always... It always ends up being like corporate greed, yada yada, you know? But I always find it at least entertaining enough that they can be caricatures of themselves and just, you know, make it just entertaining. Even I can appreciate that. Pretty much, I just need to save all the money that I can for the next, like, 5 or 6 planets so that I can get the Rhino. Because if I can get the Rhino, then this game is 1,000 times easier. Oh, Ratchet buddy.
Where
You're good, buddy. Where are your shoes at?
Sorry about that.
Walking barefoot all across this world.
The way we came in.
Perhaps we could procure a ship from one of the inhabitants.
If there are any left.
You know what? I'm not gonna put subtitles. just not gonna do that. Okay, so first we'll go here. Okay, I don't have any of the upgrades yet. Do I have any? Are the boots? No, so I still have to get the boots and stuff like that in the subsequent parts. Great. Okay. So it's gonna be like that game. Okay. I mean, it makes sense. Now, for those of who are wondering, I am recording this right after I did the World War Z game, and started, you know, really discussing the ideas of making my playthroughs, you know, fun and interesting by maybe putting in a bit of a history lesson in there. Against your will, people. Yes. I don't know. I always grew up loving history. I think it's because I watched a lot of movies when I was a kid, and I was always deeply intrigued by the reality that, especially a lot of these historical war films, I'm just like, oh, these people, like, existed. You know, these were whole real people, you know? And I know some historical films are based in history tend to be, you know, obviously not the most completely accurate, or tend to be completely biased. Like, a lot of people tend to have actually issues with, like, Gladiator and whatnot. In fairness, because I think it gets a lot of history wrong, and I mean, there's a lot of problems with that. And I think the sequel Gladiator 2 is coming out, and a lot of people are having to really stretch the limits of what history and the historical context of what things ultimately actually happen that are conclusive, that we can concur. But I always found it interesting that these were, like, real people, you know?
Look, plumber's crack.
Like, ironically, one of my favorite films is actually
Plumber's back.
Alexander,
Shouldn't you be on one of them
about
escape
Alexander the Great.
Escape transports.
Newsflash, giant robots attacking. The escape transports are taking all the rich folks off this god-darn planet.
So why aren't you on one?
Savage.
Socioeconomic disparity.
What?
He hasn't got enough bolts.
Totally off topic. I always get fascinated by this game sometimes, because, like, I'm just over here picking up bolts left and right, like, as if it's nothing, but some people get paid 6 bolts an hour for doing, like,
An info box.
insane jobs, and I'm just like, what is this, bro? Like, this is not the way.
Geronimo!
Did he just slide down a sewer pipe?
Yes, he did. Mayday, mayday.
Mayday! This is the solar ship Radical. We seem to be under attack from the planet's surface.
Relax, kid. It looks like some sort of fireworks display. Probably in your honor.
Whoa! That was close. Ah!
Pipe down, I can't concentrate.
But we've been hit!
An unexpected detour. When we land, I'll see if I can scare up an exhibition for you.
We're not gonna live that long!
Kid, let's M-screen!
Eject! Eject!
Did you see that guy on the left? That was Skid McMarks.
Does he know Captain Quark?
I doubt it. He's a pro hoverboarder, always going off about how cool he is.
Looks like he's in trouble.
I'll say, I've never seen him look so freaked out.
What was I talking about? I lost my train of thought. Anyways, oh yeah, Alexander was, like, one of my favorite historical films of all time, because, you know, when you learn about Alexander the Great, no matter how complicated a mess of that film is in terms of its historical legacy, they get a lot of things right, and the fact that Alexander the Great is quite literally one of the greatest conquerors and world figures in just human history. It doesn't really get talked about as much, I think, in today's day and age, and I think that deserves some conversations that just don't happen anymore. And I think it's also because a lot of people have been, I don't want to say downing his history lately, because a lot of people have been looking at, in particular, his father as being, really the brainchild of a lot of it, which I think is fair. I mean, he set up the Macedonian Empire in that particular way to where Alexander could just hypothetically go and just, dominate, rule, and, be Alpha Alexander. If that makes any sense. But it's also not fair too, because Alexander still did conquer, a lot of the known world. He still went and fought and did all those things. It wasn't his father. His father died. He took over and accomplished the feats that his father had hoped that he would be able to do. It's the same thing with Napoleon too, which is why I was extra bummed out when the Napoleon movie came out by Ridley Scott, because Ridley Scott's such a tricky director, because he does all these grand epic films and a lot of historical religious films, actually, even though he's an atheist, which is kind of weird, and actually bothers me to a certain degree. Like, I love Kingdom of Heaven, but it's also ironically like an aggressively anti-Christian film in just about every way, ironically, except for obviously the Leper King himself and Balian, Orlando Bloom's character, and a couple other Christian characters, but generally speaking, just the idea of Christendom being full of thieves and people who would do things that go counterintuitive to pretty much everything that Christendom represents, especially against the Leper King, King Baldwin himself. It's not quite fair, and I think always tinged with biases. And that, of course, especially their Muslim counterparts tend to be looking much better in relative comparison. I always find it very fascinating, because if you know any honest history of both sides of the debates when it comes to the historical legacy of the Crusades, you'll come to find that it's not and should not be very kind to the Islamic people or Christian people on both sides. I mean, if you wanted to actually put a scorecard, I think Christians had far more reason and justification to actually do the Crusades more than they didn't, by quite a far stretch of the imagination. I'm not saying the justification for a lot of the things that they did that ultimately the Islamic people still hold to a degree as war crimes and justifications for the subsequent Crusades. I basically just tell you to look at all the things that they did back then, and you will come to find that they are not the innocent people that they claim to be. That no one truly is, really. And it's not fair, because ultimately these wars ended up just becoming wars of violent, religious defenses, I guess. I don't know how to quite explain it. But I probably will end up talking about the Crusades at one point too. I do want to, and I think a discussion should be had about the Crusades, because there are certain aspects in history that get looked down upon, especially in Western culture, and it's one of those instances. It's the Crusades. Some would say the Dark Ages that go along with the Crusades. And I think my biggest issue with a lot of people is these people who have negative views on the Crusades and like the Dark Ages and whatnot have no real understanding of the context of history and don't really care about the context of history. And they just want to have like owning moments where they just want to shut up people because, you know, they're very pro, you know, their culture and their ideas and Christendom and stuff like that. And I always find it so discouraging because I'm just like, I'll put it this way, like people who defend and denounce a lot of the things that happened in the Crusades on the Christian side, but won't do it for the but won't do it for, say, the Islamic side. I'm just like, what are you guys doing? You're not winning any friends. You will not win any friends on the other side of the aisle just because you supported or at least understand their perspective and worldview. Like, that makes zero sense to me why you would do it. You can understand their perspective, but if you don't at the very least defend your guys' side and defend, it's gonna drop down here. Let's see, don't fall through. There we go. But are completely unwilling to look at your side and at the very least understand that your side has a perspective that is also can be justified and is just as right as the other side. Like I think you're just a hypocrite. You're not looking at things fairly, honestly, and you only want to cell phone your own people, which is dumb. You like imagine just saying a bunch of crap about your mom and your dad and your sister just because you want to seem like you're being fair and balanced, and it's like, no, it's just dumb. It's like, oh, I think the Christians were wrong.
Don't hurt me. Don't hurt me.
And I'm an atheist, but most of my worldviews and values tend to be from basically Christian values. But that's beside itself, you know.
Sir, we're not assassins.
Hold on. Let's see what he's got.
Oh, Captain Quark. What is funny that I think I commented on earlier was that I forgot how little Captain Quark is actually in this particular game. I think he's in the sequel a lot more than anything else. Unintentionally. He's surely in the third one quite a bit. Ugh, God.
You said it, pal. So if you're
I'm basically just waiting, making my money so that I can get the Rhino.
come to Al's RoboShack in Metropolis for all your robotic repairs.
I need 150,000 bolts. Can I get to 150,000 bolts? That's the question.
Do you know what this means?
Yeah, Captain Quark is really sold out.
No, it means Captain
But you know
Quark
what?
is
We're
on
not
the
going to
top.
talk about the Crusades. We're going to talk about
If we had a ship.
actual history. We're going to talk about American history. We're going to talk about, continue talking about the Presidents of the United States of America.
Cool.
You can count on us, sir.
Right.
Now, if you haven't listened,
Your chairman.
when I was talking about the presidents in World War Z, I had actually gone all the way to John Tyler, His Excellency, who was the 10th president of the United States of America. You know, he was president largely because William Henry Harrison, who had passed away because he was an idiot and old and sickly, ends up dying in office in 1840. So John Tyler runs in basically is president from 1841 to 1844. Now this opens the door for John, for his eventual successor. We're gonna go here first, whose name is James K. Polk, the 11th President of the United States of America, who I had commented before was, look, he's historically looked at as probably one of the better presidents in history for two reasons. One is because he largely told the truth to a certain degree, and you know, he was one of those guys that he said what he was going to do and did what he did. And above all else, the second thing is he actually followed through on the promises that he was ultimately going to accomplish during his one term as president, which he said he was only going to serve one term as president. A very deeply fascinating individual, one that I think deserves a bunch of praise, don't get me wrong, but also one that I am perfectly okay with being in the minority of individuals who don't like James K. Polk as president. And I don't think a lot of people should be looking at James K. Polk as a positive influence in terms of the presidency.
If you're strong enough, fast enough, and clever enough to beat my fitness challenge, you will receive a reward.
That's
from
not
my
Captain
head
Quark.
trainer. Simply make your way to the third island
That's
to
a
complete
false
the course.
prophet.
Good
That's a
luck.
false man.
Quark Enterprises is not responsible for sprains, broken bones, snapped tendons, bruised egos, or accidental death incurred while taking the challenge.
Excuse me, Captain, but
I do find it interesting that
we urgently need your assistance.
that a lot of the cutscenes, you can tell that they were from the original PS2 games and aren't rendered as well as they probably could. These are just regular in-game cutscenes with, I think, the modern engine.
An injury incurred while battling evil?
Fascinating.
This isn't the real Captain Quark, you numbskull. It's a robot.
Oh,
Oh, Clank, you stupid robot. Stupid. Stupid Clank. I'm just kidding. Clank's a real one. Clank's a real ride or die. Now, I think several things need to be understood when it comes to James K. Polk's presidency. One, pretty much any president during, I would say, 1820. Actually, I would probably say that any president post James Monroe. I mean, this country is pretty much in a very strange position overall, where it's just difficult to really explain how it's largely going to be running, how it's kind of falling apart at the same time. It's like the country's in a real gridlocked position because of the people who don't want slavery and the people who are trying to do everything they can to justify and keep slavery as long as they can, and real just disagreements between North and the South in terms of just how each people wants the country to be run retrospectively, you know. It's very difficult to actually kind of explain. It's just who's gonna have all the power, who's gonna have all the influence. Northerners want the influence, Southerners want the influence. You know, spoiler alert, Northerners do win a lot of the influences, to be honest with you, while trying to appease the South. It's a very mixed results, I will probably say. I would like the hook shot early. And my favorite character in all of the Ratchet and Clank games is this robot lady.
Listen up, you loudballs! That was the most pathetic display I have ever seen on that obstacle course!
What do you mean?
we finished the circuit, ma'am.
Oh yeah, but it was weak. Weak! When I was competing, I would devour courses like that for breakfast!
Bet that's not all.
If it were up to me, you would drill for the rest of the day! But somehow you managed to impress that fool Captain Quark!
Captain Quark knows about us?
He certainly does. And worst of all, he wants me to give you a prize for that ridiculous performance.
Cool, what is it?
I'm supposed to give you a swing shot, so you can sway to and fro like little insects.
Alright, let's see it.
Not so fast. Today the two of you disgraced my obstacle course, so I am going to make you pay.
But that prize is ours from the captain. That's not fair.
Too bad life's not fair.
Get me my slingshot that I have to pay for begrudgingly.
Sweet. I bet Captain Quark uses stuff like this all the time.
Ha! Real men can swing without silly toys like that. The two of you make me sick.
She is a savage. Yeah, it is there. Now, Polk's time as president, or as a political figure, is influenced by many different things, to be honest with you. He's the oldest of his family. His family's pretty prominent in politics. Very close friends. I think he was born in, was it North or South Carolina? Again, one of the Carolinas, just like Andrew Jackson, which of whom he has a, I would say, pretty relatively close relationship. The relationship is largely more so along the lines of his father and Andrew Jackson. James K. Polk himself and his family would eventually move and be a part of Tennessee eventually, which then, which ironically gives James K. Polk his eventual nickname. He was nicknamed Young Hickory for his comparisons and ideological likeness to Andrew Jackson, funny enough. Give me more money. I need all of the bullets that I can have. I'm pretty much going to try to speed run this game, to be honest with you. Because I haven't played any of the new Ratchet Clank games, and this just makes me want to try all the new Ratchet Clank games. And unfortunately, this game has some of the most difficult control schemes of all the Ratchet Clank games. That's not helping. He grew up pretty uniquely. He was young.
That's the man we saw on the info box. Remember? He knows Captain Quark.
Hey, you're that robot guy, right?
No, actually, I build robots.
Again, from a prominent family. He was always pretty sick as a young kid. For two reasons. One, he's not super big. But number two, he actually had gallstones or kidney stones when he was a lot younger and had to deal with that. And, you know, if anyone's ever had kidney stones, I've never had it. I drink plenty of water. It's not fun. And actually, if not treated properly, can be very life-threatening. So imagine having kidney stones for 2 years when you are, 15 or 16 years old. Like, you can't do anything, basically. It got so bad that it reached a boiling point where his father takes him to get surgery done to get rid of the kidney stones. Keep in mind, this is like 18, 15 probably, this is happening to him, and he ends up, getting a procedure and surgery done, which largely is just him drinking copious amounts of brandy while they just literally open him up. I mean, I gotta be honest, that's pretty intense. That's pain right there. But largely becomes pretty successful to get rid of the kidney stones. He ends up recovering for largely 2 years effectively. It takes him 2 years to fully recover. And that makes a lot of sense, especially back then. But it also left him sterile too, unfortunately, especially with kidney stones being so close to the bladder. And I think they pretty much just we're gonna get rid of part of your the uterus in your bladder and all that. It's just not a good situation for him, unfortunately. Although I think it was more so along the lines of just the infection that probably subsequently happened probably left him sterile. Despite that, he persevered, went to school, although a little bit later than most, and becomes a highly intellectual and prominent political figure of his time and era. Eventually becomes a state house legislature individual, gets in the Tennessee Congress, specifically Andrew Jackson's old seat, which is why they named him Young Hickory, at least part of it. I think he ends up becoming one of the younger Speaker of the Houses, along with his political, relative political equal. I wouldn't say they were like particularly close or even politically rivals, but in terms of the intellectual capacity, his, political opponent, Henry Clay, along with Henry Clay, because I know Henry Clay, when he got into political office, he was one of the first and youngest ever people to become the Speaker of the House. In fact, he actually becomes one of the first people. Actually, when he first gets elected, he immediately becomes the Speaker of the House. First time being elected, which I always find, how does that happen? Like, that shouldn't happen, should it? But, things are different back then. And then God, I'm not gonna have enough to get. Well, maybe I might. Give me more boxes like this, please. It's what, at least $2,000 in bolts right here. Now, his political career is a little bit interesting. I don't say it was bad. It was just more by the numbers. He's in Congress during the time Andrew Jackson is president, Martin Van Buren. Doesn't really do too much. I think does he become the governor of Tennessee? I forgot. I know he runs for the governorship at some point, I believe. Ends up kind of failing in a lot of aspects, actually, in terms of his political, just political ventures. Not to say that he was terrible in politics or anything like that. It was more along the lines of, how do I explain it? He voted along party lines largely. Wasn't anything particularly crazy. Was stern on certain issues, but more or less was a pretty standard Democrat idealist and thinker. Especially in comparison to like John Tyler, who's like, I am, this is my philosophy, etc., and I'm gonna go about doing my personal philosophy like this.
Must prepare this planet to be harvested for our new world.
It's a little hard to quantify, I guess, is my perspective of it.
I don't take disappointment well. Yes, sir.
Like, there were certain things that he was stern about.
Nurek is destroying yet another planet.
He was devoutly Christian, along with his wife. Because when they do get into the White House, they're like super stern on basically just all Christian things. They were very proper. Went about doing her wifely duties like that. And really, I think they had a wonderful marriage. he and his wife. And I forget all the wives' names, to be honest with you. I probably should. But outside of the obvious famous ones, and the only reasons why I don't really remember them is because unless they're like the famous ones are the ones who literally influence things to such a very negative degree that I think should be somewhat remembered, if that makes any sense. Like, everyone's gonna remember Eleanor Roosevelt because she probably had a lot more to do and say with policy than she probably should have. But you know, James K. Polk's wife didn't really do too much, to be honest with you. She was just, I'm gonna be the person that's gonna, you know, introduce the guests, etc., etc., and just do my duty. I don't think they didn't have any children because, unfortunately for James K. Polk, he was infertile because of the surgery, but she was relatively okay with that. She understood what she was getting into, that there would be no heirs for them, which good on her. I mean, if you knew going in that you were incapable of having children, but you still want to be with that person, yeah, I think that's a tough thing for a lot of people to deal with. You know, personally for me, I would struggle with that. I would, because I'd want children. I want a future and a family, and you know, I think there's something virtuistic to a certain degree that I can at least see something good in the sense that you're willing to support someone in that particular way and love this person regardless of the lack of a future, and really sacrificing, you know, a real big aspect of that future. And I don't think it should be taken lightly. James K. Polk's political career, the best way I could probably put it is that, you know, while he's in Congress, senator, governor, whatever, he's doing all these things, and, you know, over time, I think I think this is more so just the direction of the Democratic Party, and I think a lot of things were happening around that time, but James K. Polk loses a lot of favor. I think he kind of gets tired of Congress, and ultimately the lack of influence he has leads him to really, you know, take a step back on a lot of things. But you know, he loses a lot of favor in a lot of different ways, and I don't think he and Martin Van Buren in particular were on the best of terms. Not say that they didn't like each other, but I do think that there was some tension, at least to a certain degree, when it came to Martin Van Buren's presidency, that led to some disagreements between him and Van Buren. It's at least part of it. I think the biggest issue, though, was I just think things were changing, and I think not only for just, you know, Democrats, Whigs, etc., but really just the country itself. And I don't know if James K. Polk was fully ready to embrace or deal with the changes that were coming at that particular time. And you know, I mean, at one point he was about to give up on political office and just be a lawyer and just, you know, just do that. Because he ends up losing, I think, 2 consecutive state legislature elections, which, you know, if you're this prominent person and you can't even win the state legislature, like, what are you even doing, bro? You know? It's like, come on. He was about to give up, actually, but Democrats were in a bit of a weird free fall, to be honest with you, following the win and the election of William Henry Harrison, and then the subsequent his accency, John Tyler. This creates a very weird situation because Martin Van Buren's still there. I think he's trying to run for the re-election. He's still probably the most popular and most well-known Democrat. I mean, obviously he was president, and it was him. It was Lewis Cass, I believe, another Democrat senator. He's from Alabama. I forgot where he was from specifically, but him. He's a part of that. And really what was interesting was someone just threw out James K. Polk's name out, and he ends up receiving a couple votes within the Democratic National Convention, and it actually reaches the word of Andrew Jackson, and in a surprising move, Andrew Jackson, who's still alive, still has some weight within the Democratic Party, actually throws his support towards James K. Polk, surprisingly. Surprising to a lot of people, which is not helping the relationship between Martin Van Buren and James K. Polk, mind you. But because of that support, he ends up gaining a lot of followers, wins the actual nomination himself, and when that happens, a lot of people were like, who is this guy? And I was like, well, this is James K. Polk, he's the next president, bro. And it is deeply fascinating for two reasons. One, because for a lot of people, no one really knew who James K. Polk was. No one really did. You know, he wasn't this great, grandiose. I mean, sure, he was the Speaker of the House at one point, but it's not like, oh my God, you know, he's not Henry Clay. He's not like one of the top dogs. But he is a very prominent figure, and pretty much people, unfortunately, especially on the Democratic side, were just finding out who this guy was, and they were trying to figure out, do we like this guy, or do we give the vote to Henry Clay, who I think this was his last time running. At this point, Henry Clay's probably heading into his far, just much older age, and this is basically his last opportunity to become the president of the United States. Let's just put it that way. So he decides he's going to run again in the election of 1844 after many subsequent losses. This was, by all accounts, take it with a grain of salt, but I tend to believe it, at least to a large degree, because it makes some sense. This was supposed to be his election. This is supposed to be like Hillary Clinton 2016, where it's like, oh, you're like, this is your election to lose, basically. Like 99% chance you're gonna win. There's no arguments. Like this is your chance. You're gonna be the next president. And ironically, Democrats were cooking up a bunch of stuff. I'll put it that way. And what I mean by cooking up a bunch of stuff is that they were smart, they were very savvy, they understood that despite the relative known name that is Henry Clay, the reality is that despite that, Henry Clay isn't as popular as I think he thinks he is. And this led to some very interesting pushback by, I think, a lot of people. Were like, oh, Henry Clay's gonna win, and it's like, really? And then they start looking at the fact that if you gave me a relative unknown, who would I choose? And it's like, well, give me the relative unknown, to be honest with you, because I'd rather have a relative unknown than a known tyrant being the president. And a lot of people, unfortunately for Henry Clay's sake, did see him as someone who, despite his intellectual prowess, was going to be stepping on the rights of a lot of American citizens, and specifically pushing forward and towards things that were very counterintuitive to their ideas, their policies, and their positions. In particular, the people in the South. They were not. And I think, which surprised a lot of people, is that like no support in the South, basically, no support anywhere really. And really, it's just dependent on a couple states, which is why you gotta campaign everywhere, which is why you gotta do all the things that you can, and you can't be lazy, because if you get lazy, then you get elections like this, where you're supposed to be a shoo-in, and you lose pretty decisively. In the election of 1844, Henry Clay ends up running and losing to the relative unknown young Hickory, James K. Polk. It's also poignant that he's nicknamed Young Hickory because I think he and John Tyler were tied for probably the youngest presidents in the to be inaugurated in the history of this country at that point. When Polk gets in, I think he's like 47, 48, something along those lines. Which is crazy because he dies very young too. But in particular, he ends up winning pretty decisively in a surprising election, despite the lack of popularity of both political parties. But I don't think it's helped by the fact that John Tyler was discredited by Democrats, and he ends up staying a Whig throughout the entirety of the presidency. So that's not going to help either in terms of just like the country's all screwed up and we're going to blame one particular political party, and you can argue that's pretty much just what they did.
No signal whatsoever. This downtime is killing me.
Do you need medical attention, sir?
Don't be so literal, son. The problem is I'm stranded on this backwater planet and my
Now I remember how this game goes, and as long as I don't die 50,000 times, I'm largely gonna be able to probably complete this in about 5 or 6 hours. Because I'll level with you, when I first did my original playthrough, I think I ended up doing the last boss battle at least 3 or 4 times. That in itself took like 40 minutes. Ugh. What's funny is I don't even think I need to actually bring whatever prize tool thing, mainly because it's just it gives me like some special thing, but it doesn't give me like magnet boots or grind boots or anything along those lines, so it's kind of pointless. Now where to? I do everything here. I did that. Oh, mission's complete. Now let's go to the logging company.
Yes, quite lovely. That should just about do it. Commander, we are finished with this world. Commence towing our planet to its next destination. Lieutenant! Yes, sir. You have fulfilled your tree quota. Well, we are ready to return to base. Not so fast, Lieutenant. Just because we don't need any more trees doesn't mean they should have them. Destroy everything.
Boop, 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 boop. Now, James K. Polk as president, what did he do? Well, I think what helped too was when James K. Polk was campaigning, he, or had people campaign for him, however you want to quantify that, he kept it very simple, very short, very sweet on the things that he was largely going to do. And I think it was 3 or 4 things in particular. One was first that he was only going to serve 1 term. So I think that actually helped people in deciding to actually vote for him, because he's like, I'm not going to be a tyrant. You give me an opportunity, I'm going to serve 4 years, and I'm in and out fast. because at that point, understand there's no actual term limits specifically up until I think the 24th or 25th Amendment. I forgot which amendment it was, which was ratified like almost 100 years later, mind you. So there was always the possibility that a lot of these people who are, you know, these great political figures might not follow in the line of George Washington. So I think that helped. The other things that are of note. Wait, what did I just do? Did anything happen? I'm actually really confused right now. I did that. Am I supposed to go another way? Huh. I thought the hook... Okay, I'm just gonna die. Let's see what happens. I'll go this way this time. I don't know if the game just glitched on me, because I'm pretty sure I was supposed to be a slingshot over there. Although I very much could just be mistaken. I overdid it there, but whatever. I'm supposed to go the other way. Just the whole point of this one right here. This little bolt's right here. I think after this level, I'll probably put a stop to the first part. What else? So the other things were to resolve the issue with Texas and Mexico, specifically trying to get Texas to be a part of the state, which, spoiler alert, results in ultimately what becomes of the Mexican-American War. Trying to figure out, it was one other important thing, but the other real big important thing was defining the territories that would be the Northwest Territories in Washington and Oregon. Negotiating with the British along those lines. What else? Pretty much it. And again, the reason why I tend to have much sour feelings toward James K. Polk in comparison to, say, John Tyler's predecessors, because I think he gets a lot of credit, whether fairly or unfairly, because of the situations that largely had occurred during the previous administration's presidency, and a lot of the goodwill and a lot of the preparation that came from his predecessor's legacy. Especially the Northwest Territories, and getting the military ready to a certain degree with the during the Mexican-American War. I mean, it went from being like we had a pretty small army to now we're gonna have like 200,000 troops. We're ready for war, you know. And, like, it's about to go down, so meet me at the mall. It's gonna go down. Meet me in the club. It's gonna go down. And I think more often than not, when given the opportunity, whether reasonable or not, and I'll be fair, part of it's probably unreasonable. I tend to look at him as someone who is much more of a political mastermind. Like him as our president and then him as a congressman are two very different things. That's just probably the single best way that I can explain it. They completely govern and completely act in two very different facets. Because him as a president's basically like very authoritarian, very dictatorial in a lot of ways. Really just not conducive for what I think a lot of people had in mind when it came to, you know, him as a leader. Now, in his defense, you know, he's a wartime president, and he's put out 4 years. He knows that. And there are a lot of things and political machinations going on, as the Whigs are still a relatively... I mean, they are the second biggest party in the country at this point. Even if they are a weak second party, they're trying to do their political maneuvering in order for Polk to at least look stupid, if not outright fail, in his one term as president. So I think it's a fair question to point out, an interesting question, that, you know, is it fair for me to discredit him because of what I believe are the results of his big personality change and his aggressive nature towards more authoritarian politics and real shady behavior, like very, very real shady behavior. I mean, the Mexican-American War starts because of him, not because of him, not because like Mexico kind of going crazy, but it's like, I'm going to bait Mexico into attacking us and then use it as a justification for war. Like, even history books do not like deny this. They're basically just flat out saying, yeah, he definitely put troops there to, you know, stoke tensions and violence, and, you know, that's not what you want, and that's not how it should be done. Because if you're using those tactics to get what you want and what you need, then you're not actually doing so for just causes. You're doing so for your own personal justification because you want to get things done, you know? Which is why it's difficult for me sometimes when people basically say, I'm going to do just these 2 or 3 things, because then it's like, okay, but if you don't do 2 of those 3 things, then you're not going to be seen as an honest president, and above all else, like, you're going to be seen as a liar, and, you know, you're going to put way more pressure on yourself to get these things done, and you're probably going to do them in ways that are not very conducive, that only make your legacy look worse in relative comparison to what we look at you today. Sorry, that was a huge mouthful. But he basically starts the war in Mexico, and honestly probably could have just ended the war so much sooner had he not done and made stupid choices, which prolonged the war even longer than it probably should have gone on for. In particular, just the issues he had with Zachary Taylor, his several commanding officers. Oh, this game is so cheeky, I love it. Second time getting the suck cannon, bro. Okay, let's try this one more time. Let's see if we can actually get through to this area. Now, can I come up here? What's the point of this area? Okay, well. Because I think with better weapons and obviously all the unlocks and whatnot, this game can be done pretty quickly and pretty seamlessly. Oh, crap. Crap baskets. That one's on me, people. That one's on me. the Mexican-American War is a very difficult one. And I'll be honest too, I think my biggest issue is with, are you kidding me right now? Again, this is why I love this game, but this game is very, it's not aged very well, this particular Ratchet and Clank. Let's just put it that way. And especially, it doesn't help that I played the remake of this game, remake of the movie of this based off of this game, and that game's so much better. See, okay, that's what I'm looking for. And then there we go. That's what I'm looking for. Did I not see them earlier? Am I tripping? I did not see them earlier. I'm probably just tripping. Ooh, big bad guy. Hey-yo.
You sure showed him.
I suppose I did.
Is your current occupation leaving a rotten taste in your mouth? Then you
Oh,
need to know
Drex.
about BTS, Log Tactical Research Station.
Oh, man.
I'm Supreme Executive Chairman Drek.
But,
BTS are seeking motivated individuals to fill positions in these exciting careers. Grind boot tester.
I tend to look at Andrew, or James K. Polk's presidency in particular as a real defining presidency because it's important, because it's like this weird little crossroads for things that ultimately can and will occur. And his is important because if his presidency doesn't occur, I think the Civil War happens probably 10 years earlier, or gets resolved in a much different way. I think a lot of the international stuff really begins here. I mean, this is a very potentially damaging presidency in the long run for the health of this country, because it starts going from, okay, we're just going to do this and do that, and then now it's like, okay, well, I'm trying to figure out what's real and what's not anymore, more so than anything else. There's the beginnings of really zero integrity in certain aspects of politics and the political games that are going on, and so much so that it's just completely discouraging as completely discouraging as someone who loves this country and loves the United States. And when I look at this particular historical period, I just tend to look at it not as fondly. Because here's when I look at history, I'll look at it this way. I mean, obviously, a couple of critiques and criticisms aside, I more or less will trust certain aspects in most history, especially of the colonial Americas, pretty much up until like post Andrew Jackson. I would say that's when things get very weird. I'm gonna end this part here though, folks. I'll explain more stuff in the next part. God bless, and like and subscribe, y'all. Hope y'all have a good one.